Sarah Martinez stood at the edge of the high school parking lot, watching the yellow buses pull away one by one. The October wind whipped through her dark hair as she clutched her worn backpack against her chest. At 17, she had learned to make herself invisible, but today that skill had failed her spectacularly. The memory of what happened in the cafeteria still burned in her mind. She could hear their laughter echoing in her ears, see the cruel smirks on their faces as they held up her father's old military uniform that she had brought for the Veterans Day presentation. The fabric had been carefully pressed, each metal polished until it gleamed. It was all she had left of him. "Look at this old thing," Madison Wells had sneered, holding the uniform high above her head. "Did your dad buy this at a garage sale?" The popular girl's friends had erupted in laughter, their voices cutting through Sarah like broken glass. "Maybe he was just playing dress up. I bet he never even saw real combat." Sarah's hands had trembled as she reached for the uniform, but Madison had tossed it to her boyfriend, Derek, who caught it like a football. "Please give it back," Sarah had whispered, her voice barely audible over the cafeteria noise. But they had continued their cruel game, passing the uniform between them while making jokes about discount soldiers and wannabe heroes. The worst part wasn't even the mocking. It was when Madison had accidentally spilled chocolate milk all over the jacket, staining the fabric that Sarah had spent hours cleaning the night before. The brown liquid had seeped into the green material, and Sarah had watched in horror as her father's memory was literally being destroyed before her eyes. "Oops," Madison had said with fake innocence, her perfectly manicured fingers covering her mouth in mock surprise. "I guess your daddy's costume needs another trip to the thrift store." Mrs. Henderson, the lunch monitor, had finally intervened, but the damage was done. The uniform was ruined, and Sarah's heart felt like it had been ripped from her chest. She had grabbed the soiled jacket and run from the cafeteria, leaving behind the stunned silence and whispered conversations that would follow her for the rest of the day. Now, standing in the empty parking lot, Sarah felt the weight of loss pressing down on her shoulders like a physical burden. Her father, Staff Sergeant Miguel Martinez, had died when she was 12. He had been killed by an improvised explosive device while serving his third tour in Afghanistan. The uniform wasn't just fabric and buttons to Sarah. It was proof that her father had existed, that he had served his country with honor, and that he had loved her enough to fight for her future. The uniform had been the centerpiece of her Veterans Day presentation. She had planned to tell the class about her father's bravery, about the letters he had written to her from overseas, about how he had saved 3 wounded soldiers during an ambush in Kandahar. She had wanted to share the story of how he had given his life protecting others, how he had earned every single medal that decorated his chest. But now the presentation would never happen. The uniform was destroyed, and, with it, Sarah felt like a piece of her father had died all over again. As she walked the 3 miles home to the small apartment she shared with her mother, Sarah's mind wandered to better times. She remembered being 7 years old and trying on her father's oversized helmet, giggling as it slipped down over her eyes. She remembered the smell of his aftershave and the way his strong arms felt when he hugged her goodbye before his final deployment. Her mother, Rosa, was working her second job at the diner downtown. She wouldn't be home until after midnight, which meant Sarah would spend another evening alone with her homework and her grief. Rosa worked 16-hour days to keep them afloat financially, but the struggle was constant. They lived paycheck to paycheck, and there was never money for extras like new clothes or school supplies. Sarah knew her mother blamed herself for not being able to provide better for them. Rosa often cried when she thought Sarah was asleep, and Sarah could hear her mother's muffled sobs through the thin walls of their apartment. The guilt was eating away at both of them, creating a cycle of sadness that seemed impossible to break. The apartment building where they lived was old and run down. The paint peeled from the walls like old scabs, and the heating system worked sporadically at best. Sarah's bedroom was barely large enough for a twin bed and a small desk, but she had tried to make it her sanctuary. Pictures of her father covered one wall, showing him in various stages of his military career, from his fresh-faced enlistment photo to his final official portrait. Sarah dropped her backpack on the kitchen table and pulled out the stained uniform. Under the harsh fluorescent light, the chocolate milk stains looked even worse. She ran her fingers over the fabric, feeling each thread and remembering how proud her father had looked wearing it. The bronze star was still pinned to the chest, along with the Purple Heart he had earned after being wounded in his second tour. She tried washing the stains in the bathroom sink, scrubbing gently with dish soap and cold water. But the brown marks had set into the fabric, creating permanent reminders of the day's humiliation. As she worked, tears fell onto the wet uniform, mixing with the water and soap in a ceremony of grief that felt ancient and necessary. The phone rang around 8 o'clock, startling Sarah from her homework. It was her mother calling from the diner during her break. "How was school today, Mija?" Rosa asked, her voice tired but loving. Sarah considered telling her mother about what had happened, but she couldn't bear to add another burden to Rosa's already heavy load. "It was fine, Mama. How's work?" "Busy tonight. Tips are good, though. Maybe we can afford pizza this weekend." Rosa's forced cheerfulness couldn't hide her exhaustion. "Did you finish your homework?" "Almost done," Sarah lied, looking at the math problems that might as well have been written in hieroglyphics for all the sense they made to her scattered mind. After hanging up, Sarah returned to the ruined uniform. She had an idea, desperate and probably foolish, but it was all she had. She carefully removed each medal and pin from the jacket, setting them aside on a clean towel. Then, she opened her laptop, the old machine taking several minutes to boot up, and began searching online for uniform repair services. The prices she found made her stomach sink. Professional cleaning and restoration would cost more than her mother made in 2 weeks. There had to be another way, but Sarah couldn't think of what it might be. She was just a 17-year-old girl with no money, no connections, and apparently no way to honor her father's memory. As the night wore on, Sarah found herself looking through old photo albums. Her father smiled back at her from dozens of pictures, his eyes bright with life and humor. In one photo, he was teaching her how to tie her shoes. In another, he was pushing her on a swing at the park near their old house, before they had to sell it to pay for his funeral expenses. There was one photo that always made Sarah pause. It showed her father with his unit, all of them in full combat gear, standing in front of an armored vehicle in Afghanistan. The men and women in the picture looked young and serious, but there was something in their eyes that spoke of unbreakable bonds and shared purpose. Her father had his arm around a female soldier who couldn't have been much older than Sarah was now. Sarah had always wondered about the people in that photo. Were they still alive? Did they remember her father? Had anyone told them about his death? The questions had haunted her for years, but she had never known how to find the answers. On impulse, she decided to try something she had never done before. She scanned the photo into her computer and uploaded it to a social media page dedicated to veterans. Along with the image, she typed a simple message: "This is my father, Staff Sergeant Miguel Martinez, who died in Afghanistan 5 years ago. I'm looking for anyone who served with him or knew him. Please share if you can." She hesitated before clicking the submit button. What if no one responded? What if she was just setting herself up for more disappointment? But then, she thought about the ruined uniform sitting in her bathroom and realized she had nothing left to lose. The post went live at 11:47 p.m., and Sarah immediately regretted it. She closed the laptop and tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Madison's mocking face and heard the sound of fabric being torn. Around 2 in the morning, her phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had commented on her post. Then, another notification arrived, and another. By 3 a.m., Sarah couldn't resist checking to see what was happening. Her post had been shared over 100 times. Comments were pouring in from veterans all over the country, people sharing their own memories of her father and expressing their condolences. But one comment made Sarah's heart stop. "Sarah, this is Master Sergeant Linda Chen. I served with your father in Afghanistan. I've been looking for you and your mother for 5 years. Please message me immediately. I have something that belongs to you." Sarah stared at the screen in disbelief. Someone who had known her father was reaching out to her. Someone who had been looking for them. She quickly typed a private message, her fingers shaking as she hit the keys. "Master Sergeant Chen, I can't believe you found me. My mother and I live in Phoenix now. My father never talked much about his service, and we don't know anyone else who served with him." "What do you mean you have something that belongs to us?" The response came back within minutes, even though it was the middle of the night. "Sarah, your father saved my life in Afghanistan. Before he died, he asked me to make sure you and your mother were taken care of, but we lost track of you after you moved. I've been searching for years. I live about 4 hours from Phoenix. Can we meet this weekend? There are some things you need to know about your father, and some people who want to meet you." Sarah read the message 3 times before it fully sank in. Her father had friends, people who cared about him and who had been looking for them. After 5 years of feeling alone and forgotten, she had found a connection to her father's military family. She quickly typed back, "Yes, please. We can meet anywhere you want. My mother works weekends, but I'm free. Thank you for reaching out. You have no idea how much this means to me." As dawn broke over Phoenix, Sarah finally fell asleep with her phone clutched in her hand and hope looming in her chest for the first time in years. She didn't know what Master Sergeant Chen wanted to tell her, or what belonged to them, but she knew that something had changed. The cruel laughter from the cafeteria seemed far away now, replaced by the possibility that her father's story wasn't over yet. The ruined uniform still hung in her bathroom, stained and damaged, but Sarah no longer saw it as a symbol of defeat. Instead, she began to see it as the beginning of something new, something that would connect her to the military family she never knew she had. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations with Master Sergeant Chen, and new understanding about who her father really was. But tonight, for the first time in months, Sarah Martinez fell asleep without crying, her dreams filled with visions of honor and belonging that she was only just beginning to understand. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of desert sunshine that made everything look sharp and clear. Sarah had barely slept, her mind racing with questions about what Master Sergeant Chen wanted to tell her. She had texted her mother about the meeting, and Rosa had given her permission to drive the family's old Honda Civic to the meeting location. They had agreed to meet at a small cafe in Scottsdale, halfway between Phoenix and where Master Sergeant Chen lived. Sarah arrived 30 minutes early, her palms sweating as she gripped the steering wheel. She had changed clothes 4 times that morning, finally settling on jeans and a simple blue t-shirt that she hoped looked respectful. The cafe was busy with weekend customers, families enjoying brunch and couples reading newspapers over coffee. Sarah found a corner table and ordered a hot chocolate she couldn't afford, nursing it while watching every person who walked through the door. At exactly 11 o'clock, a woman in her late 30s entered the cafe. She was medium height with short black hair and the kind of posture that immediately identified her as military. Her eyes scanned the room with professional efficiency before landing on Sarah. There was something in her expression that made Sarah's chest tighten with emotion. "Sarah Martinez," the woman asked, approaching the table with confident steps. "Yes, ma'am," Sarah replied, standing up so quickly she nearly knocked over her chair. Master Sergeant Linda Chen smiled, and Sarah immediately saw kindness in her eyes. "Please, call me Linda. And sit down, honey. You look like you're ready to salute me." As they settled into their seats, Linda studied Sarah's face with an intensity that was both comforting and unsettling. "You look just like him," she said quietly. "Especially around the eyes. Miguel used to get that same expression when he was thinking hard about something." Sarah felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "You really knew my father?" "Your father saved my life," Linda said simply. "But more than that, he was my friend. We served 2 tours together, and he talked about you and your mother constantly. He carried pictures of you in his helmet, and he made everyone in the unit promise that if something happened to him, we would make sure his family was taken care of." Linda reached into a large black bag beside her chair and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "After he died, I tried to find you and your mother, but you had moved, and the military bureaucracy isn't great at keeping track of families after a soldier dies. I've been searching for 5 years. We had to sell the house," Sarah explained, her voice small. Mom couldn't afford the mortgage on her own, and the insurance money wasn't enough. We've been struggling ever since." Linda's jaw tightened, and Sarah could see anger flashing in her eyes. That should never have happened. Miguel died serving his country, and his family should have been protected. She slid the envelope across the table. "Open it." With shaking hands, Sarah opened the envelope and gasped. Inside were dozens of photographs she had never seen before, showing her father with his unit, laughing and working alongside other soldiers. There were letters he had written but never sent, sketches he had made of the Afghan landscape, and copies of commendations she didn't know he had received. But what made Sarah's heart stop was the official document on top of the stack. It was a recommendation for the Silver Star, signed by her father's commanding officer and dated just 2 weeks before he died. "What is this?" Sarah whispered. "Your father was recommended for the Silver Star for his actions during the ambush that killed him," Linda explained. "He charged into heavy fire to rescue 3 wounded soldiers, and he held off enemy forces while medical evacuation helicopters could land. He died protecting others, Sarah. He was a hero in every sense of the word." Sarah stared at the document, trying to process what she was reading. "But why don't we have this? Why didn't anyone tell us?" Linda's expression grew grim. "Because the paperwork got lost in the bureaucracy after he died. His unit was transferred, and somehow the recommendation never got processed. I've been fighting for 5 years to get this corrected, and I finally have all the documentation we need to submit it again." Sarah looked up from the papers, her vision blurred with tears. "You've been fighting for my father for 5 years? I told you, he saved my life. And, more than that, he was family. We all were family over there." Linda reached across the table and squeezed Sarah's hand. "But there's more. The reason I was so desperate to find you is because your father left something for you." From her bag, Linda pulled out a metal box that Sarah recognized immediately. It was her father's personal effects container, the one the military had given them after he died. But this box looked different, heavier. "This isn't the same box we got," Sarah said, confused. "No, it's not. The box they gave your family contained his personal items from his barracks. This box contains what he carried with him on missions." Linda opened the lid carefully. "He asked me to make sure you got this when you turn 18, but I figured 17 was close enough." Inside the box was another uniform, but this one was different from the one Madison had ruined. This uniform was worn and faded, marked with the dust and sweat of actual combat. The fabric was softer, broken in by years of wear, and every patch and insignia told a story. "This is the uniform he was wearing when he saved those 3 soldiers," Linda explained. "It was damaged in the explosion, but I had it cleaned and repaired. He wanted you to have it so you would know what real service looks like." Sarah touched the fabric reverently, and she could swear she felt her father's presence in the worn material. This wasn't a dress uniform for ceremonies and presentations. This was a working uniform, a warrior's clothes that had seen real battle and real sacrifice. "There's something else," Linda continued, pulling out a small recording device. "He made this for you the night before he died. We had no idea it would be his last message, but he wanted to record something for your 18th birthday." With trembling fingers, Sarah pressed the play button. Her father's voice filled the small cafe, strong and clear and alive. "Hey, baby girl. If you're hearing this, it means Linda found you and you're old enough to understand what I'm about to tell you. First, I want you to know that every single day I've been over here, I've been fighting for you and your mother. You two are my reason for everything." Sarah pressed the device closer to her ear, desperate to catch every word. "I know military life has been hard on our family, and I know I've missed too many birthdays and school plays. But I need you to understand that everything I do here has meaning. We're protecting people who can't protect themselves, and we're making sure that little girls like you can grow up safe and free." The recording continued for nearly 10 minutes, her father sharing stories about his fellow soldiers, talking about his hopes for Sarah's future, and expressing his love for both her and her mother. At the end, his voice grew more serious. Sarah, if something happens to me, I need you to take care of your mother, but, more than that, I need you to know that you come from a family of fighters. Your grandfather fought in Vietnam, your great-grandfather fought in World War II, and you carry that strength in your blood. Whatever challenges you face, remember that you're stronger than you know. When the recording ended, Sarah was crying openly. Linda handed her a tissue and waited patiently while Sarah composed herself. There's one more thing, Linda said gently. Your father's unit has stayed in touch over the years. We have a group chat, we meet up sometimes, and we all consider ourselves family. When I posted about finding you, every single person who served with Miguel wanted to meet you. Meet me? They're here, Sarah. At a hotel about 10 minutes away. Your father's entire squad, plus some of the soldiers he saved. They've all been waiting for years to tell you how much your father meant to them. Sarah felt overwhelmed. In 24 hours, she had gone from feeling completely alone to discovering that she had an entire military family she never knew existed. But, first, Linda continued, I want you to know that these people aren't just here to pay their respects. They've been taking care of you and your mother in ways you don't know about. What do you mean? Linda pulled out another envelope, this one containing bank statements and financial documents. After your father died, his unit started a fund for you and your mother. Every month, each of us has been putting money aside. Some of the guys have been saving their combat pay, others have been setting aside part of their civilian salaries. Sarah stared at the numbers on the bank statements, unable to believe what she was seeing. This is almost $50,000. It's enough to pay for your college education, and to help your mother get some training for a better job, Linda explained. We've all been waiting for the right time to give this to you, but we couldn't find you. I don't understand. Why would you do this for us? Because your father would have done the same thing for any of our families. That's what soldiers do, Sarah. We take care of each other, and that includes taking care of the families of the people we've lost. Sarah felt like she was living in a dream. 24 hours earlier, she had been a poor girl being mocked by bullies, and now she was learning that she had a whole community of people who had been looking out for her family for years. There's something I need to tell you, Sarah said suddenly. Yesterday at school, some kids destroyed my father's dress uniform. They poured chocolate milk on it and made fun of him, saying he probably wasn't a real soldier. Linda's expression darkened. What are their names? It doesn't matter now, Sarah said, though she could see the protective anger in Linda's eyes. What matters is that I was going to give a presentation about my father for Veterans Day, but now I don't have a uniform to show. Linda smiled, and Sarah could see something calculating behind her eyes. What if I told you that you could give a much better presentation than you originally planned? What if instead of just talking about your father, you could show your classmates what real military service looks like? I don't understand. How would you like to come to school in full military gear, accompanied by a squad of actual combat veterans? How would you like to give a presentation that those kids will never forget? Sarah's heart began to race. You mean you would come to my school? Sarah, your father's entire unit has been waiting 5 years to honor his memory properly. If you're willing, we'd like to help you do that. We can arrange for a full military presentation, complete with honor guard and everything. But, I'm not military. I can't wear a real uniform. Linda reached into her bag one more time and pulled out a small package. Actually, you can. After your father died, he was posthumously inducted into several veterans organizations. As his daughter, you're entitled to certain honorary recognitions. She unwrapped the package to reveal patches and insignia that could be worn by family members of fallen soldiers. These aren't military rank, but they show that you're part of the military family. If you wear these with the uniform your father left for you, you'll be honoring his memory in the most appropriate way possible. Sarah looked at the patches, each one representing a different aspect of her father's service and sacrifice. For the first time since the incident in the cafeteria, she felt something other than sadness and anger. She felt pride, and, more than that, she felt powerful. When is your Veterans Day presentation? Linda asked. Next Friday. Perfect. That gives us a week to plan something that your school will never forget. Linda pulled out her phone and began scrolling through contacts. I'm going to call in some favors. How would you like to have a real military helicopter land in your school parking lot? Sarah's eyes widened. You can do that? Sarah, your father died saving American soldiers. There's not a veteran in this country who wouldn't be honored to help his daughter tell his story properly. Linda's smile was fierce and protective. Those kids who mocked your father have no idea what they've started. As they left the cafe, Sarah felt like she was walking in someone else's life. In a few hours, she would meet the soldiers who had served with her father, the men and women who had been family to him in his final years. She would hear stories about his courage and his humor, and she would finally understand what it meant to be part of the military community. But, more than that, she was beginning to understand what her father had meant in his recording when he said she came from a family of fighters. The girl who had been mocked and humiliated in the cafeteria was gone. In her place was someone new, someone who carried the strength of generations of soldiers and the love of a military family she was only just beginning to know. Madison Wells and her friends had no idea what was coming for them. They thought they had destroyed something precious, but they had only revealed something much more powerful. Sarah Martinez was about to show her entire school what real strength looked like, and she wasn't going to do it alone. The hotel conference room felt like a sacred space when Sarah walked in. 23 men and women stood as she entered, their faces showing a mixture of grief, pride, and unmistakable love. These were the people who had shared the final years of her father's life, who had fought alongside him and watched him die protecting others. Linda made the introductions, and Sarah felt overwhelmed by the stories that poured out. Sergeant Davis told her how her father had taught him to play poker during long nights on guard duty. Corporal Williams shared how Miguel had talked her through a panic attack during her first firefight. Master Sergeant Rodriguez showed her photos of the makeshift birthday party they had thrown for her father just 3 weeks before he died. But it was the 3 soldiers her father had saved who affected Sarah the most deeply. They stood together, scarred and serious, and, when they spoke about Miguel Martinez, their voices carried a reverence usually reserved for prayer. Your father ran into an active kill zone to get us out, said former Sergeant Jake Morrison, who now walked with a slight limp. The doctors said I would have bled out in another 3 minutes. He literally gave his life for mine. He covered our evacuation for 7 minutes against overwhelming enemy fire, added former Corporal Lisa Zhang, whose left arm bore extensive scarring. When the medics finally got to him, his last words were about making sure we were okay. He made me promise to go to college, said former Private Marcus Johnson, who couldn't have been more than 25. He said he didn't want his death to mean nothing, and that all of us had to make something good out of our lives. I graduated last year with a degree in engineering, and I dedicate every accomplishment to him. Sarah listened to story after story, each one revealing a different aspect of her father's character. He had been a protector, a teacher, a friend, and a leader. He had made people laugh during the darkest moments and had given them strength when they thought they had nothing left. We've all stayed in touch, Linda explained as the formal introductions wound down. Some of us are still active military, others have transitioned to civilian life, but we're all family. And, Sarah, that means you and your mother are family too. The group had prepared more than just stories. Over the past week, they had been coordinating with military contacts, veteran organizations, and even some active duty units to plan something unprecedented for Sarah's school presentation. We've arranged for a Black Hawk helicopter to land in your school parking lot on Friday morning, announced Major Patricia Hayes, who had been Miguel's commanding officer. The crew volunteered their time, and the school district has given permission for the demonstration. But that's not all, added Staff Sergeant Tony Ruiz. We've coordinated with the local Army National Guard unit to provide an honor guard. 6 soldiers in dress uniforms will escort you to the auditorium. Sarah felt dizzy listening to the plans they had made. But why are you doing all this? I'm just one kid giving a school presentation. You're not just one kid, said Linda firmly. You're the daughter of Staff Sergeant Miguel Martinez, and, when people disrespect his memory, they disrespect all of us. More than that, you're representing every military family that has ever lost someone in service to this country. Former Corporal Zhang pulled out her phone and showed Sarah a video that had been uploaded to social media. Word about your father's story has spread through the veteran community. This video has been shared over 10,000 times in the last 3 days. The video showed various veterans from across the country expressing their support for Sarah and sharing their own stories about Miguel Martinez. Some had served with him in different units, others had only heard about his heroism secondhand, but all of them felt connected to his sacrifice. The hashtag Miguel Martinez Hero is trending on 3 different platforms, explains Sergeant Davis. There are Vietnam veterans, Gulf War veterans, Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, and even some World War II veterans sharing stories about soldiers like your father. Sarah scrolled through the comments on the video, reading message after message from people who felt personally invested in honoring her father's memory. Many of them shared their own stories about being disrespected or ignored after their service, and they saw Sarah's situation as a chance to stand up for all military families. The local news stations want to cover your presentation, added Major Hayes. Channel 12 has already confirmed they'll be there, and Channel 7 is sending their veteran affairs correspondent. News stations? Sarah felt panic rising in her chest. I can't handle all this attention. I'm just a high school student. Linda sat down beside Sarah and took her hands. Honey, you don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with. But I want you to understand something. Your father died believing that his sacrifice mattered, that he was protecting something important. Tomorrow, you have the chance to show the world that he was right. Those kids who mocked your father's uniform, said Morrison, his voice hardening. They represent everyone who thinks military service is a joke, everyone who thinks soldiers are expendable. You have the opportunity to educate them. But, more than that, added Major Hayes, you have the chance to inspire other military kids who might be going through the same thing you are. There are thousands of children across this country whose parents have died in service, and most of them feel alone and forgotten. You can show them that they're not alone. Sarah thought about the isolation she had felt for the past 5 years, the sense that she and her mother had been abandoned by the world after her father's death. If she could prevent even one other military child from feeling that way, maybe all this attention would be worth it. What exactly would I need to do? She asked. Linda pulled out a detailed schedule they had prepared. Friday morning, you'll arrive at school in the uniform your father left for you, wearing the honorary patches we discussed. The Black Hawk will land at 8 a.m., and you'll exit the helicopter with the honor guard. The entire school will be assembled in the auditorium by 8:30, continued Major Hayes. You'll have 30 minutes to tell your father's story, with visual aids we've prepared. Then, the honor guard will present you with your father's Silver Star recommendation, which we're fast-tracking through official channels. After your presentation, any student or faculty member who wants to can visit the helicopter and meet with the veterans who came to support you, added Sergeant Davis. We'll have displays set up showing different aspects of military service. Sarah looked around the room at these people who had known her father, who had loved him and been willing to die alongside him. Each face showed the same expression of fierce protectiveness and determination. There's one more thing, said former Private Johnson quietly. We've been in touch with your mother. She's going to take the day off work to be there. You talked to my mom? Linda called her this morning, explained Major Hayes. Your mother has been carrying a lot of guilt about not being able to provide better for you after your father died. We wanted her to know that she's not alone anymore. Sarah felt tears sliding down her cheeks. For years, she had watched her mother struggle with exhaustion and financial stress, working multiple jobs and still falling behind on bills. The idea that her mother might finally get some relief from that burden was almost too much to hope for. We've also arranged for your mother to meet with a VA counselor who specializes in helping military families navigate the benefit system, added Linda. There are programs and services available that she might not know about. And the fund we've been saving for your family, said Sergeant Rodriguez. We're going to present that to your mother on Friday as well. She can use it for whatever she thinks is best, whether that's your education, better housing, or job training for herself. Sarah looked down at the uniform pieces they had given her, the patches that would identify her as part of the military family. The fabric felt different now, charged with the weight of responsibility and the power of community. "What about the kids who destroyed my father's original uniform?" she asked. "What happens to them?" The veterans exchanged glances, and Sarah could see that they had discussed this question extensively. "That's not our decision to make," said Linda carefully. "But we understand the school administration has been made aware of what happened, and they're not happy about it." The school board received over 300 emails from veterans and military families in the past 2 days, added Major Hayes. Apparently, word about the incident spread through military social media networks. "We're not looking for revenge," clarified Morrison. "But we think it's important for those students to understand the real consequences of their actions. Disrespecting a fallen soldier isn't just a prank, it's an attack on the values that protect their freedom." Sarah spent the rest of the day with her father's military family, listening to more stories and looking through hundreds of photographs she had never seen. She learned that her father had been planning to retire from the military after his 3rd tour, that he had been looking forward to coaching her high school softball team, and that he had been saving money to buy her a car for her 16th birthday. But she also learned about his courage under fire, his loyalty to his fellow soldiers, and his unwavering commitment to protecting innocent people. She saw pictures of him building a school in an Afghan village, teaching local children to read, and providing medical care to civilians caught in the crossfire of war. As the afternoon turned to evening, Sarah began to understand that her father's legacy wasn't just about his death, but about how he had lived. He had been a protector, a builder, a teacher, and a friend to people who needed hope in the darkest places in the world. "Are you ready for Friday?" Linda asked as the gathering began to wind down. Sarah looked around the room one more time at the faces of people who had shared the most dangerous and meaningful experiences of her father's life. These were warriors, people who had faced down enemy fire and mortal danger, and they were all here because they loved her father and wanted to protect his family. "I'm ready," she said, and, for the first time in 5 years, she truly meant it. The girl who would walk into school on Friday morning would not be the same person who had been humiliated in the cafeteria just a week earlier. This new Sarah carried the strength of her father's sacrifice, the love of his military family, and the responsibility of representing every service member who had ever been forgotten or disrespected. Madison Wells and her friends had thought they were destroying something precious when they poured chocolate milk on a dead soldier's uniform. What they had actually done was awaken something much more powerful, something that would change not just Sarah's life, but the lives of everyone who witnessed what was about to happen. Friday morning couldn't come soon enough. Friday morning arrived with the kind of Arizona sunshine that made everything look like it was glowing from within. Sarah stood in her bedroom at 6 a.m., staring at herself in the full-length mirror her mother had borrowed from their neighbor. The transformation was complete. She wore her father's combat uniform, the one that had been through actual warfare, properly fitted and bearing the honorary patches that identified her as the daughter of a fallen hero. The fabric felt different against her skin than any clothing she had ever worn. It felt like armor, like strength, like belonging. Her mother stood behind her, tears streaming down her face as she helped adjust the collar. Rosa Martinez looked younger than she had in years, some of the exhaustion lifted from her features by the knowledge that their long struggle was finally coming to an end. "You look just like him," Rosa whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "He would be so proud of you, Nija." "Are you sure about this, Mama?" Sarah asked, though she already knew her answer. "It's going to change everything. After today, everyone will know our story." "Good," Rosa said firmly. "Let them know. Let them know what kind of man your father was, and what kind of family we are." Linda arrived at 6:30 to drive them to school, and Sarah was surprised to see that she was wearing her own dress uniform, perfectly pressed and decorated with ribbons that told the story of years of dedicated service. Behind her, Master Sergeant Rodriguez and Sergeant Davis waited in a second vehicle, both also in full military dress. "Ready?" Linda asked, but Sarah could see the question went deeper than just asking about the day's events. She was asking if Sarah was ready to step into the role of military family member, ready to represent not just her father but all the soldiers who had sacrificed for their country. "I'm ready," Sarah replied, and she meant it completely. The drive to Roosevelt High School was surreal. As they got closer to campus, Sarah could see news vans lining the streets and crowds of people gathering in the nearby parking lots. The local Veterans of Foreign Wars Post had organized a supporting presence, and dozens of older veterans in uniform stood at attention along the school's front walkway. But it was the sight of the Black Hawk helicopter sitting in the middle of the school parking lot that made Sarah's heart stop. The massive aircraft looked impossibly out of place among the Honda Civics and pickup trucks, its rotors still and powerful in the morning light. "Jesus," Rosa breathed, staring at the helicopter. "This is really happening." Major Hayes approached their car as they parked, her own dress uniform immaculate. "Sarah, are you ready to make your entrance? The entire school is assembled in the auditorium, and the honor guard is waiting." Sarah took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. Immediately, she was surrounded by the 6 soldiers of the honor guard, all of them active duty personnel who had volunteered their time to escort the daughter of a fallen comrade. Their presence was both comforting and overwhelming. "Daughter of Staff Sergeant Miguel Martinez," announced the honor guard leader in a voice that carried across the parking lot. "You are escorted by the United States Army with all the honors due to your family's sacrifice." They walked toward the helicopter in formation, Sarah in the center, protected and supported by soldiers whose very presence commanded respect. As they approached the aircraft, Sarah could see students and faculty members watching from classroom windows, their faces pressed against the glass in amazement. The helicopter crew, led by Chief Warrant Officer Thompson, saluted as Sarah approached. "Ma'am, it is our honor to transport the family of Staff Sergeant Martinez," he said formally. "Your father's sacrifice will never be forgotten." Sarah had never been in a helicopter before, and the short flight around the school before landing again was both terrifying and exhilarating. As they circled the campus, she could see hundreds of people gathered below, all waiting to honor her father's memory. When they landed and Sarah emerged from the helicopter with her honor guard, the crowd of veterans began to applaud. It started slowly, just a few people clapping, but within seconds it had grown into thunderous ovation that seemed to shake the ground beneath Sarah's feet. She walked through the gauntlet of applauding veterans, each face showing the same expression of fierce pride and protective love that she had seen in her father's military family. These were people who understood sacrifice, who had lost friends and comrades, and who saw in Sarah the representation of every military child who had ever been left behind. The auditorium was packed beyond capacity. Every seat was filled, and students stood along the walls and in the aisles. Sarah could see Madison Wells in the third row, her face pale and uncertain. Derek sat beside her, no longer looking like the confident bully who had tossed her father's uniform around like a football. Principal Johnson introduced Sarah with words that made her father's service sound like the heroic story it truly was. As she walked to the podium, the honor guard took positions around the auditorium, their presence lending weight and solemnity to everything that followed. Sarah looked out at the sea of faces, some curious, some bored, some openly emotional. In the back of the auditorium, she could see the veterans who had come to support her, their faces encouraging her to tell her story with pride and strength. "My name is Sarah Martinez," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "1 week ago, some students in this school destroyed my father's military uniform and mocked his service. They poured chocolate milk on fabric that represented years of sacrifice and said my father was probably just playing dress-up." A murmur ran through the auditorium. Sarah could see Madison sinking lower in her seat. "Today, I want to tell you about the real Staff Sergeant Miguel Martinez, and about what it means to serve your country with honor." What followed was 30 minutes that changed the lives of everyone present. Sarah told the story of her father's heroism, supported by photographs and video testimony from the soldiers he had served with. She shared the recording he had made for her 18th birthday, his voice filling the auditorium with words of love and dedication that brought many audience members to tears. She talked about the night he died, how he had charged into enemy fire to save 3 wounded soldiers, how he had held his position for 7 minutes against overwhelming odds, and how his last words had been about making sure his fellow soldiers were safe. But she also talked about the cost of his service. She described the years of deployments, the missed birthdays and school events, the financial struggles her family had faced after his death, and the isolation she and her mother had felt as they tried to navigate life without him. The students who mocked my father's uniform thought they were making fun of old clothes, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger with each word. What they were actually doing was disrespecting the memory of every soldier who has died protecting the freedoms we all enjoy. She paused and looked directly at Madison and Derek. They couldn't meet her eyes. But I don't want apologies, Sarah continued. I want understanding. I want everyone in this school to know that when you see someone in military uniform, whether they're active duty, veteran, or family member, you're looking at people who have sacrificed more than you can imagine. Major Hayes joined Sarah on stage and presented her with the official Silver Star recommendation that had finally been processed through military channels. This decoration represents the gratitude of a nation for Staff Sergeant Miguel Martinez's ultimate sacrifice, she announced. It will be officially awarded posthumously next month, but his daughter deserves to see it recognized today. The ceremony concluded with the honor guard presenting a folded American flag to Rosa Martinez while a military bugler played taps. There wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium, and even the most cynical students seemed to understand that they had witnessed something profound and important. As students filed out of the auditorium, many of them stopped to thank Sarah or to ask questions about military service. Several students whose own family members had served approached to share their own stories, creating connections that Sarah realized had been missing from the school community. Madison Wells approached the stage area hesitantly, her face red with shame and emotion. Sarah, I don't know what to say. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Sarah looked at the girl who had caused her so much pain just a week earlier. Madison looked smaller now, diminished by the understanding of what she had really done. I know you didn't understand, Sarah said quietly. But now you do. That's what matters. Derek appeared behind Madison, his usual swagger completely gone. Sarah, I want you to know that I'm going to tell everyone what really happened. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows what your father did. Thank you, Sarah replied simply. The rest of the day passed in a blur of interviews with local news stations, conversations with students and faculty members, and an extended visit to the helicopter where the crew explained military aviation to fascinated teenagers. The veterans who had come to support Sarah shared their own stories and experiences, turning the school parking lot into an impromptu military education fair. But the most meaningful moment came when Sarah was finally alone with her mother and Linda in the empty auditorium. How do you feel? Linda asked. Sarah thought about the question seriously. A week ago, she had been a poor, isolated teenager whose greatest treasure had been destroyed by cruel classmates. Today, she was surrounded by a military family she hadn't known existed, with financial security her mother hadn't dreamed possible, and with a sense of purpose she was only beginning to understand. I feel like I finally know who I am, Sarah answered. I'm not just Sarah Martinez anymore. I'm the daughter of Staff Sergeant Miguel Martinez, and I'm part of something bigger than myself. What happens now? Rosa asked. Linda smiled. Now you two start living the life that Miguel wanted for you. Sarah, you're going to college on a full scholarship funded by your military family. Rosa, you're going to get the job training you need to build a career that doesn't require 16-hour days. And both of you are going to know that you're never alone again. As they walked out of the school together, Sarah noticed that students moved aside to let them pass, not out of fear or intimidation, but out of respect. She had gone from being invisible to being seen, from being powerless to being strong, from being alone to being part of a community that spanned the entire country. The uniform she wore felt different now than it had that morning. It no longer felt like costume or borrowed strength. It felt like her birthright, like a mantle she had inherited from her father and would carry forward into whatever came next. Madison Wells and Derek had thought they were humiliating a poor girl with second-hand clothes. Instead, they had awakened a sleeping giant, a network of military families and veterans who would never again let one of their own stand alone against mockery and disrespect. As Sarah climbed into Linda's car for the drive home, she looked back at Roosevelt High School one last time. The building looked the same as it always had, but she knew that something fundamental had changed within its walls. The students who had attended her presentation would never again look at military service the same way, and they would carry that understanding with them for the rest of their lives. Her father's sacrifice had meaning beyond the 3 soldiers he had saved in Afghanistan. It had meaning in every person who heard his story and understood that freedom comes with a price, that some people are willing to pay that price for others, and that the families of those heroes deserve respect and support. Sarah Martinez had started the week as a victim. She ended it as a warrior, carrying forward the legacy of a father she was finally beginning to truly understand, supported by a military family that would never let her stand alone again.